I'm about to show you how to go from $0 all the way to making your first million within the next few years. Just like I did growing my Section 8 portfolio to over $1.9 million at the age of 21, and I only started at 18. And if you give me the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to break down how to buy, rent, and manage cheap rentals so that you can start building real wealth with Section 8. Before you start investing, you need to understand what you're aiming for. The goal is simple: own 11 rental homes, each worth about $90,000, rented to Section 8 tenants for $1,400 a month. That is a total of $990,000 in total property value. Plus, you have to account the appreciation of the homes themselves over the 2 years, putting you at well past $1 million. At a 20% cash-on-cash return, you're earning around $500 per house per month, which is equal to $5,500 in net cash flow every single year. And the best part of this is not a theory. This is what I actually did. Step 1 is saving your first down payment. You need about $25,000 saved up. This is going to be your launch pad. Now let me switch over to the iPad here. There we go, home number 1. There we go. You're going to need excuse the handwriting, $1,000. Now, why do you need $25,000? Well, with this $25,000, it breaks down into a few different parts. So the first is the down payments, so 20% down. So assuming the home is, $80,000 to $90,000, that would be around $18,000 right there. Then you're going to have your rehab costs and your closing costs. I probably should have put closing costs in the middle there, but that's okay. So closing costs are typically around, in this price range, $6,000. And rehab, I always like to go for pretty much turnkey homes. However, I like to still have a small buffer there. So we're putting aside about $1,000 in random fees / super small handyman tasks that you're going to have to assign. However, of course, this could increase or decrease depending on what your tolerance is. But long story short, you don't need 6 figures in the bank. And I saved up my $25,000 by living super frugally. I ended up living cheap, automating my savings, and honestly treating this down payment like a business. And if you keep saying, oh, I don't have $25,000, oh, it's too much money. Well, think about it this way. A traditional house is $400,000 in the US, which 20% of that is $80,000 down. So this strategy is literally one of the cheapest ways to get into real estate. And if you want to go even cheaper, there is one other method. If you're okay living at the property for at least 1 year, you have another option. You can house hack it. What does that mean? Well, you're going to be using a 3.5% down FHA loan or a 3% down conventional loan, or if you're going for multifamilies, 5%. So what I recommend is finding a duplex near you or a single family home with a finished basement. So that means instead of putting down $25,000, you might only need $8,000 to $10,000 to get into that deal. But here's the catch. I don't want you doing this unless you run the numbers and you're hitting at least 15% ROI. Because if you're not hitting at least 15, well, then it doesn't make sense to go for it. It makes sense to just get your first property in a different area, save up the $25,000. Now, what does it mean to get 15% ROI? Well, it means that the rent from the Section 8 tenant after expenses should give you a real return, and it's not just becoming a roommate situation. And once you move out of that primary residence, you can convert it into a full rental or 1031 it into a next property. The next step is going to be forming your LLC and using a special type of loan. And this is where most beginners mess up. They kind of skip the foundation steps. So you want to form an LLC before buying your first rental. So this first home right here, let's put this in a huge bubble right now, is going to be owned by the LLC. Now, why do you want to use an LLC? Well, there's a few reasons. So number 1, it protects your personal assets. I think I just spelled assets wrong, but that's okay. But what does it mean by protecting your personal assets? Well, it basically means that if they try to sue you, they can't go after your personal home. They can't go after your personal bank accounts, your personal car. They can only go after the value of the home itself or any business account attached to this LLC. Now, why else? Well, simply put, owning an LLC just kind of looks professional. I've noticed that contractors, realtors, lawyers, etc., they treat you a lot better if you have an LLC. if you don't have one and you try to approach them buying a rental, they kind of look at you like a rookie. And the last reason is because it keeps your finances completely clean. So there is not going to be any type of mixing of funds, right? Your personal funds aren't going to be used for business. Your business funds aren't going to be used for personal, which is great because it stops a judge in court from saying, hey, we're gonna pierce the corporate veil because guess what? You are mixing your funds, so this LLC is null and void. And you should definitely do this step because creating an LLC only costs $100 or $200, and you do it one single time online and it's done. Past that, you just renew it yearly. Now, for the financing part of things, you want to use DSCR loans, which is debt service coverage ratio loans, kind of a mouthful. But these are game changers because of a few reasons. So this first home is owned by the LLC, but it was actually purchased using a DSCR loan. Now here are the pros of DSCR. So the first is they don't check your income. So no types of pay stubs, no tax returns, no W-2. All they look for is, will this rental property make enough money to pay off the mortgage? Now, how do they actually determine that? Well, they use a calculation called the DSCR ratio. What they basically do is they take the mortgage. So let's say the mortgage is $1,000 estimated. What they do is they divide it by however much it could possibly rent for. Whoops, sorry, I accidentally flipped it. At the bottom goes the mortgage. So $1,000 at the bottom, this is the mortgage. And then at the top is going to be how much it could realistically rent for. So let's say the rent is $1,500 in this scenario. That basically means you are at a 1.5x DSCR ratio. And that is actually really good because they'll typically approve anything that is at 1.2% or higher, or 1.2x. Now, these DSCR lenders actually look at the fair market rent. They don't look at what Section 8 would pay. So if you're saying, oh, this could totally go for, $1,800 on Section 8, but a regular tenant would be $1,500, they're going to choose the lower of the two numbers. That is just how being conservative with your numbers are. But even with that being said, I have never come across a scenario where they deny one of our loans. And it's simply because we do this calculation beforehand. And also, when you're going this low in loan prices, they don't really ever go bad in terms of the ratio. Like, it's very hard to have a $600 mortgage and not be able to rent it for at least $8. Now, the main con though is that DSCR loans have a slightly higher rate. I'm talking about 1 point higher than what conventional is. So yes, it'll probably increase your monthly mortgage by like $40, but in my opinion, not having to have any type of income shown at all, being able to get super easy approvals, sometimes 3-week closings, being able to close under your LLC. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer for me. Like, I'm going to use DSCR for every single loan I ever do in the past, in the future, for all time. And the lenders only ask for a few things. So instead of asking for the income, what they're going to ask for instead is a form of ID, right? That is obvious. They're going to ask for a bank statement. This is basically to prove that you have enough money for at least the down payment. And then finally, they're going to ask for the LLC documentation, which if you're a mentorship student of mine, we organize it all for you. So they're going to ask for articles of organization, the SS4, the operating agreement, and I recommend having the business bank account set up at this point as well. By the way, if you're serious about building your own Section 8 portfolio, join my free school community. There's over 500 investors already inside, and I run a free live webinar twice a week, Monday, Friday. So come learn, ask some questions, and connect with people doing the exact same thing as you. Moving on to the next part, which is I like to call it the 90K 1400 model. What does that mean? Well, it is the type of home I looked for. Homes around $90,000. So let me go ahead and go to this side so that we could talk about the specifics. The home itself was $90,000. in a C-class area, and it could rent for around $1,400 through Section 8. So with these homes, I was not looking for luxury. I was just looking for cash flow and consistency. That's really all I care about. So you might be asking, why Section 8 in the first place? Well, it's for a few reasons. The rents are direct deposited to your bank account every single month like clockwork. As long as you're passing the inspections, they will never miss it. Like even during COVID, they were still paying the rent. In fact, they were pretty much the only landlord being paid rent during COVID. There is also just super low competition. Only about 5% of all homes are Section 8. It's actually kind of crazy how little there is on the market. Now you might be wondering, okay, but maybe that's just how many low-income people there are. Incorrect. There are a total of 11% of all Americans are below the poverty line. Meaning 11% of all Americans should qualify for Section 8, but they don't because they're waitlisted. And another big reason why I like Section 8 is because you can ask for rent increases. You can typically ask for 3 to 5% yearly. Now, will they actually give it? Well, the big thing is you have to have correct comps, meaning you have to have basically proof that the average home price and home rent has increased in your area. So I like to give them Zillow comps, affordable housing comps of homes in the same zip code that are a higher price than mine. And let's say that they end up rejecting, right? They end up rejecting the 5% increase. Guess what? You can just go back to them and dispute it, right? Maybe you can get this 5% rejected, right? But they might go for this 3% instead. It is negotiable. Now, let's also kill the absolute biggest myth that I hear, which is Section 8 tenants are going to destroy your home. I'm sorry to say, but this is just a landlord problem. This is not a tenant problem at all. So, and this is getting a little bit messy. So this comes down here. It is renting for $1,400. Now, what kind of tenants are we getting at this $1,400 price? Well, typically we're getting single moms, the elderly, those with disabilities. This is our ideal group of tenants. Now you might be wondering, why would you ever go for them, right? They seem like they can't pay the rent. It's almost the exact opposite. They don't have anywhere else to go. And I know that sounds rough, but it's the truth. They typically don't have anywhere else to go. This is their lifeline. So as long as you're a good landlord, then you're going to have a good tenant as well. Now, we also check for a few things. Check their credit. However, we only check their payment history. Why do I only check their payment history? Well, it's because chances are they don't have good credit. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. In fact, even regular tenants oftentimes don't have good credit. So all I care about is this payment history. I don't really care if it's a 400 score. I just care, have they at least been making the minimum payments on all of their cards and loans itself? Because then I at least know that they are trying and that they are at least somewhat responsible. Now we're also going to look at eviction history. If they have an eviction on record, it is an automatic decline. If they have a violent criminal record, it is an automatic decline. Now I know that is kind of extreme, right? But it's just not worth the risk as a landlord, right? You can get evictions taken off the record eventually, right? I believe it takes 7 years. So if it's older than 7 years, chances are it doesn't even show up. Now, violent crime, I just don't want to take that risk. I don't with any of my tenants. I don't care if it is the only applicant we've gotten all week. I'd rather just not take the risk. Now, one other thing we do is at-home interviews. Now, what do you look for during the at-home interviews? Well, you want to make sure that they are same day so that they don't have time to clean up after themselves. Then you're going to look at the condition of their car and the condition of their home. Oh, my handwriting's terrible. So what do I mean by that? Well, I don't care if the car has rust on it or if it is, falling apart. I don't care if the home itself is falling apart, right? As long as it's not tenant caused, right? If the car is filled with McDonald's bags and Coca-Cola stains, then I know that they're kind of a slob and that's not worth it for me to take on. Now, if the interior of their home has laundry everywhere and holes in the drywall that are clearly from a fist going through them, then same thing. It's not worth me taking them on. But if it's in at least good condition and I see that the home itself is distressed, maybe some wood is falling apart, maybe the gutters need repaired, okay, that's fine, because I know that's the landlord's responsibility typically. That's not even on the tenant. My Section 8 tenants have stayed for years. My student Section 8 tenants have stayed for years. They're the easiest part of this process. I'm not sure why there's this huge stigmata against them. I feel like most of the time it's from landlords who just didn't vet tenants properly and have a bad taste in their mouth. The next section is to never touch the money. And this is where most investors mess up. They see that first rental check and they think, let me go buy the new Corvette. Don't do it. That $500 net from your first property, you want to stack it and reinvest it. And here is how the snowball method works. This whole process right here was just for house number 1. Right there. Let me make this a little thicker. Now, what about house number 2? Well, how do you fund house number 2? Because guess what? It is the exact same costs as house number 1. It is still going to be $25,000 in cash that you're going to need, which 20% down is roughly $18K. You're still going to have closing costs, which are going to be roughly $6K, and you're still going to have potential rehab costs, which could be, I always like to reserve at least $1K, but you could really go up to $4K. What do you do now? Well, this $25,000 shouldn't just be, again, your W-2 salary. Instead, this $25,000 should be a few different things. So it should be mostly your W-2 salary, but also it should be part of the $5,500 net that you get from house 1. And now instead of needing $25,000 from your main job, you only need $19,500. Or of course, less or more depending on how far along you want to buy this house. If it's 6 months, then obviously this $5,500 is going to be divided by 2. You get the point. Let's assume it's only 6 months, right? So instead of having $5,500 net, let's say it's 3K, right? Things have been going well for you. So instead of $19,500 you only need $22,000, which still a lot of money, but it's no longer $25,000. I mean, 3K is a decent amount of money. You can get a cheap used Corolla for that price. So going through this entire process, once again, that you just went through up here, I mean, nothing changes with the whole process. It is going to get you a total of, these in total are now getting you $1,000 a month net. Okay, but now what do you do about house number 3? So for house number 3, you again, nothing changes, still need $25,000. Once again, 20% down, $6K in rehab, and then a small reserve. None of this has changed at all. But now instead, assuming another 6 months has passed, this $25,000 is coming from 3 sources. You have house number 1, which is giving you another $3,000. House 2, giving you another $3,000. And then your W-2 job, or whatever job you have. And now you only need $19,000 from your W-2 job. Do you kind of see where this is going here? This snowballs very, very quickly because guess what? Every single home, let's assume you buy every 6 months, every single home is going to be minus $3,000, minus $3,000, minus $3,000. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you're practically not using your W-2 income anymore. By the time you're at 6 homes, you're almost self-sustaining. You can keep buying 1 to 2 homes every single year without touching your W-2 money. And when you're at 11 homes, you're pretty much just buying them one after another. So this is how you scale without needing a massive inheritance from someone. Like, yes, you still need money, I'm not gonna lie about that, but it's just way, way less than trying to scale with traditional rentals. Okay, let's assume you're now on house number 5. You didn't do all of this just to give yourself another job. So here is how you make it passive. You have a few options, which is 1, bring in a property manager. They will typically take 8 to 12% of the gross rent, but in return, they're going to handle pretty much everything. You are 100% hands off. Now, another option is to use some type of software. So these softwares include Rent Spree for the actual screening of the tenants. There's also Tenant Cloud for the management of the tenants. Or if you have a lot of properties, I'm talking at least 30, there is Appfolio. Or of course, there is still number 3, which is self-manage. I don't really recommend doing this unless you are in the same state. I like doing, personally, this hybrid model. So this is the hybrid, where half of it is software, which handles the rent collection, the eviction notices, etc. And then you also can do tours of it, sending out the contractors yourself. How do you do the tours? You can hire a handyman, hire an inspector. So this one, in my opinion, is going to be the best. It is going to be some fees involved, right? I'm guessing around 4% of your gross rent typically will go to the software / random handyman visits, but still way better than a property manager. And self-manage, obviously you keep 100% of it, but I think it is using up a lot of your time, especially when you start scaling. So in my opinion, this software is definitely worth it. So these softwares handle quite a bit. They handle rent collection, late notices, tenant screening. They handle lease renewals. They also go through tenant communication and maintenance requests. Pretty much anything that you don't physically need to be at the property for. And the things that you do, hire a handyman. Now, of course, this also applies to the property manager. Because at the end of the day, your rental should be working for you, not the other way around. Okay, so I've kind of written quite a bit here, but let us go through the final math. You now have 11 different rentals. So 11 homes times an average price of $90,000 per home is equal to $990,000 in assets. And that is assuming the purchase prices have stayed the same. The Section 8 rents. It is $1,400 per home times 11 homes is equal to $15,400 in gross rent. Now, after the expenses, we are looking at about $500 per home, which times 11 is equal to $5,500 per month, or a yearly net of $66,000 per year. And that is all completely passive too. You'll also be building equity as your tenants pay down your loans. So even at a pretty low 2% appreciation per year, that's an extra $20,000 per year in value across your portfolio. So after 5 years, you've paid down a lot of the debt, you've built over $300,000 in equity, and you have earned over $300,000 in rent checks, all provided completely direct deposited by the bank account every single month. That is your $1 million portfolio. It is not from gambling, it's not from going viral, it is real, boring, powerful real estate. If you follow this blueprint, there is no reason you can't build $1 million Section 8 portfolio just like I did. And if you're serious about making this your year, there's actually a strategy I've been implementing for my students recently where you can buy homes with literally no income. to build these huge Section 8 portfolios. So watch the video on the screen next, where I show you what it is, how it works, and how you can use it to start building your cash flowing real estate empire. I'm Joseph Khateri. Have a nice day.